23-year-old Texas native Eric Campbell standing trial for the New Year's Eve murders of an elderly North Carolina couple and their 2 dogs. He's also accused of robbing them, burglarizing their home, and then setting it on fire. Campbell maintains he's innocent and points the finger at the man he claims committed the crimes, his own father. He says that during their camping trip, Ed Campbell killed Jerome and Dora Faulkner and that he was powerless to stop it.
This wasn't a question of whether or not Eric Campbell was there. The question was, did he help his dad do this? And that was the central issue in this case, was whether or not Eric Campbell was there as an active participant, or whether or not Eric Campbell was there because he was afraid and he didn't know what to do.
The prosecution, however, argues the father-son duo traveled from Texas to North Carolina with a much more sinister agenda. Faulkner's murders were part of a crime spree spanning several states.
Just as the very first matter, did you kill Dora and Jerome Faulkner?
No, I didn't.
We knew that their argument and their defense was Eric didn't do anything, and anything that he did participate in, he did because he was under duress. And you know, they had a fine line to walk too, because they had to acknowledge the brutality of the murder. You know, there was no way they could kind of walk away from that.
Did you shoot them with a crossbow?
Objection to please. No, sir.
Oh, you can answer. Did you spray them with any chemical?
No, sir, I didn't.
Who did those things?
My dad.
Did you want your father to do those things?
No.
Officers arrived there at the Faulkner's house, and nobody knew where the Faulkners were. They were able to determine that there were no bodies in the house, and there was sort of a search for them because Jerome's truck was gone.
One of the firefighters, who was also a sworn deputy sheriff, noticed blood on the back doorsteps of the house. We believe that they knocked on the door and sprayed either Dora or Jerome Faulkner with the caustic chemical, and then made their way into the house and tried to overpower them.
During the assault, a number of weapons were employed against both Dora and Jerome Faulkner, including a spear, plastic bags, a firearm, a crossbow. The injuries that both Dora and Jerome Faulkner had, they included a gunshot wound to Jerome's leg. Jerome was shot with the bolt of a crossbow, which was still inside of his torso. Both were bludgeoned, suffocated. The medical examiner explained at the conclusion of the autopsy that both Dora and Jerome Faulkner died a slow and torturous death.
Mr. Faulkner suffered from chemical burns, his face, all on his back. Dora had blunt force trauma to her forehead, and she also had been shot with a crossbow through the sort of side of her body. None of these injuries would have been life-ending immediately. So we believe that Jerome and Dora fought for one another and fought for their lives during the duration of this horrible attack.
Eric Campbell drove the white Suburban. A short time later, an automatic registration plate reader popped and showed that Suburban was registered stolen. Edward Campbell was driving the stolen Chevrolet truck. He pulled over ahead of Eric Campbell on the Suburban.
Driver, come on back here. Anybody else in the Suburban? Anyone else in the Suburban? Come on back here.
When officers questioned Eric Campbell, Edward Campbell approached the officers.
Did you ever have a license plate stolen and report it? No, sir. No? Who's the registered owner of it? Right here. I am to County. 2 of us have been shot in the head.
They returned fires.
Get out. One suspect is down, he's still breathing.
Striking Edward Campbell in the lower leg, disabling him.
Nick said there's 2. There's one more. Yeah, there's one that took off in a truck.
Eric Campbell fled the scene. He took control of the Faulkner's truck and fled the scene with their bodies in the bed of the truck.
We've got one suspect took off in a truck. And a red Silverado 1500. County, I'm going to try to shut down the interstate until we get the red truck.
Eric Campbell fled the scene. He wrecked a short time later and fled into the woods.
After their arrest, the father and son duo were extradited to North Carolina to await trial. 3 months later, 54-year-old Ed Campbell's found unresponsive in his cell by correctional officers.
Ed Campbell took his own life. He hung himself and left his son to face the full wrath of the state.
Did your dad ever use physical force against you?
Yeah. Based about any kind of mistake a boy could make.
Were you afraid of your dad?
Yes, I was.
And what would your dad do when he was at home?
At a point, he started making methamphetamines in his shop.
Now, how often did your dad use methamphetamine?
Every day.
In Texas, where the Campbells lived, Edward Campbell became suspicious and paranoid that his wife was involved in an extramarital affair. As a result of that, Edward Campbell savagely beat and assaulted Holly Smook.
One of the gas stations we stopped to, my dad almost wanted to rob the place. And one of my main reasons for going with him was to keep this kind of stuff from happening.
Now, I want to talk about the night that Faulkners were killed. At any point, did he tell you how he picked that house or why he ended up there?
I thought that we were supposed to be camping at a house across the street.
What did he tell you?
He said that he had seen a man at the end of a driveway in a truck that he wanted, but that was where he was going. He walked up to the front door. And he rung the bell.
And where were you when he walked up to the front door?
At the corner of the house. I started hearing yelling. Yelling come from the house, screaming. People saying, "Get out of my house. You're not welcome here."
And then what did you hear?
Somebody screaming, "God help us," and a gunshot.
And what was going through your mind when you heard all that?
I was afraid that my father was robbing somebody, that somebody had just been shot. My dad came back out. He grabbed me by my coat and just pulled me inside.
What happened when you were inside? What'd you see?
Just seeing an arrow that was in somebody's chest and thinking that's not supposed to be there.
Did you try to fight your father and stop him from doing this? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to answer.
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because it happened very fast. I didn't know what to do.
If you were with your father and your father suddenly started doing something, in a very strong way you didn't agree with, how quickly would you respond to that? How confident would you be able to respond to that? And when you put all that together, Eric's actions make sense. They make sense with his own lived experience. I mean, we know from other evidence at some point Mr. and Mrs. Faulkner's bodies were placed in their truck. Do you know how that happened?
My dad eventually told me that we needed to move them.
Now, did your dad tell you any reason why he wanted their bodies?
He was going to make a mask of his face and wear it.
What did you think when your dad told you that that was his plan?
It's crazy. It's utterly crazy.
So when he went up to that house in the dark, you knew that he had a sprayer that was filled with light with a crossbow.
Yes, sir.
Your dad rang the doorbell and Mr. Faulkner came to the door, is that right?
Yes, sir. He did.
And you knew that he intended to rob the Faulkners.
When he's walking through the door with a crossbow, yes.
Well, the injuries that Dora Faulkner sustained that led to her death was where her skull was bashed in by an antique spear. And that's the spear that you carried to the home.
Yes, sir.
In this camo backpack.
Yes, sir.
You're in this bedroom with her and your father.
I was.
Based on the injuries sustained to both Dora and Jerome Faulkner, it seems likely that Edward Campbell was responsible for those injuries, and also plausible that Eric Campbell participated.
By getting Eric Campbell to admit that he brought a spear into the Faulkners' home, the spear that caused Dora Faulkner's terrible head injuries, the prosecution begins to cast doubt on his claim that he was a witness, not an accomplice to murder.
After the murders were committed, both Edward and Eric Campbell drove to the local Walmart in Oxford, North Carolina.
With the bodies of Jerome and Dora Faulkner still in their home, Ed and Eric Campbell head out in their white SUV to purchase items that'll be used in yet another crime, arson.
And when you arrived at Walmart, the Faulkners were dead.
Yes, sir.
You were sitting in the parking lot, and you saw your dad walk through the 2 sets of glass doors into a Walmart that was about to close. You didn't drive away, did you?
I didn't drive away because I was scared my father was going to come back out and start shooting. And even if I did drive away, he would have killed somebody in there and taken their car.
Well, you weren't concerned about him killing the Faulkners, were you?
Concerned. I didn't know he was going to kill the Faulkners.
State of North Carolina versus Eric A. Campbell. Verdict. We, the jury, by unanimous verdict, find the defendant, Eric A. Campbell, to be guilty of first-degree murder.
After the guilty verdict came in, now the big question is the jury going to choose the death penalty for Eric Campbell?
You have unanimously recommended that the defendant be sentenced to life imprisonment